Thank you
I
so
really
much.
So, I misspoke when I said we'd start with the idea of order at Key West because what I had forgotten to do is ever to talk about the snowman. So I'd like to start with the snowman, which is one of the very first poems in Harmonium. And I think it's really quite wonderful. And I'm commemorating the weather here today. It was 23 last night. We live in a house without central heating, so when it gets cold, it gets cold. And so I'm sitting here dressed in a camisole, two sweaters, a blanket, and a scarf, and pretty cold. Anyway, the snowman. One must have a mind of winter to regard the frost in the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow, and have been cold a long time to behold the junipers shagged with ice, the spruces rough in the distant glitter of the January sun, and not to think of any misery in the sound of the wind, in the sound of a few leaves, which is the sound of the land full of the same wind that is blowing in the same bare place for the listener who listens in the snow, and nothing himself beholds nothing that is not there, and the nothing that is. I love this poem. For one thing, I think it's really elegantly written. The way the sentences sort of turn and curl on themselves, not to think of any misery in the sound of the wind, in the sound of a few leaves, which is the sound of the land full of the same wind. That's really elegant writing. It's beautiful the way it comes back and repeats itself. But also, the really important thing to notice here is this isn't just the snowman, it's the snow man. So just like the waste land is the land that has been laid waste for Eliot, the snow man is the man who's made of snow. This poem strikes me as quite a Zen poem. In its not exactly celebration, but its affirmation or its commemoration of nothingness, of emptiness. This kind of circular nothing that is not there and the nothing that is. I guess it's never struck me as a despairing poem so much as a poem that wants to get down to the very basic emptiness that lies at the center of creation between the molecules, between the atoms, this empty space, you know. So, whatever it is to have a mind of winter, that is something that Stevens associates with New England, with the snow, with, you know, bareness, sparseness, to regard the frost in the boughs of the pine trees crusted with snow. This is a rare poem that uses semicolons well. Those are, I was once taking a workshop and we were warned to never, ever, ever use semicolons. But this uses them really beautifully because the whole poem is one sentence. And so it's modulated, it's paced by its punctuation. So I don't know if anybody has comments or questions about this poem. Douglas, you're mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I mean, aside from I just love this is one of my favorite poems of his. But there are things where that people might not know about. For instance, the sound of a few leaves, like in Northeast, there the beech trees don't lose their leaves, um, and they hang on for quite a long time. And during the winter, when the wind blows through them, they make this strange hissing, rattling
Yeah,
sound that's very different. It's not a summer sound at all. And also in when we're surrounded with forest here, so during the summer, when the winds blow, when a high wind blows, it's a very different, much softer
yeah,
sound when the wind blows, and in the winter it howls.
yeah,
It's quite extraordinary when the high winds come blowing through the pine trees and through the leafless deciduous trees. It really howls differently than in the summer.
That's really cool. Yeah, the term for that is marcescence. My friend Laura Gray Street is writing a whole book called Marcescence. And because she lives in Virginia and she has trees that are marcescent, and she's writing a book about the death of her father, you know. But I love that. I love that. I never knew that until I was, talking to her one time.
We have trees that are marcescent too,
We
the
do.
beech and to some extent the oak,
Yeah, we do.
common
What
tree.
it, what specifically? What's the definition of that? I never heard that term
They
before.
hang on to their leaves longer than other
Oh, okay.
deciduous
Yeah,
trees.
they're not evergreen. They're deciduous, but they don't drop their leaves. So the leaves turn brown and brittle, but they stay on the tree.
I missed the
And
word.
they,
What's the word for that?
Marcescence. Do you know
Oh,
how to spell it?
but
And
you
are,
do they? You say they get brown. Well, do they just get green again then in the spring?
no, they eventually fall off, but beech
Oh, okay.
trees, in a relatively mild climate, the leaves will often last all the way through the winter. And oak leaves last, around here into December or January.
They last until you've already raked up all the other leaves.
Yeah,
And then
Kind
exactly.
of, yeah,
the oak leaves fall down.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
that's true for me here in Colorado also. I mean, all of the deciduous trees on my property are bare except my one oak,
Mhm.
and it's still completely covered with leaves, dried leaves. And my experience is that it's the new buds in the spring that push the old leaves off.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Sometimes a high wind will shake a lot of them off, but they don't just they never just fall off.
That's really cool.
And what is your position on semicolons?
Oh, I think they have to be used very sparingly because they are a highly academic form of punctuation, you know,
Was that
But
a
you say
sentence that
that,
say
and
they have to be used very sparingly, semicolon, because?
because they're very
um,
academic.
Yeah.
you say that, and Barry told me the same thing the other day, and or expressed the same view. But how do you know if they're academic unless you're an academic? I mean, I don't. They don't seem that much worse than using big words like what you just gave us. They don't seem much more academic than that. And
No,
I think it's a rhythm thing. Sometimes you just want that pause.
Yeah.
And you got it. You can use a dash, or you can use a comma, or you can use a semicolon, or you can do a full stop.
Yeah.
And sometimes the rhythm, it seems to me, dictates that you use a semicolon. What's
That's
wrong with
true.
that?
That's true. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing that's wrong in poetry. Use colons, you can use exclamation points, you know, but
Well, saying there's nothing wrong is a cop out, Anne.
it is. I'm copying out. I'm copying out. No, I always say to my students, the proof is in the pudding. If you make it work, you make it work.
the new
There you
fashion, both academic and journalistic, is to overuse full colons
Oh yeah.
to set up an independent sentence by ending the previous sentence with a colon when you don't need to.
Yeah.
I've noticed that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being an academic.
There's nothing
Yeah,
wrong
there you
in
go.
academic.
What?
But
Many of us have been or are, you know. No, there isn't. But you don't want your poetry to sound like a scholarly article in PMLA.
yeah,
Let's
So
just put it that way.
supposedly, an M dash is a sign that something is written by AI, right?
Nah,
You don't believe
I
that?
use them. No, I use them. I know I've seen that too.
Yeah.
That's a pretty slapdash way of deciding whether it's AI or not.
I wonder if
I love
AI uses
dashes.
semicolons properly.
Yeah, I love dashes. I use dashes a lot. Okay, let's move on because the other side of this would be Farewell to Florida, which is also, well, it's not exactly the other side. It's a poem about returning from Florida to Connecticut, okay, to the world of the snowman.
You
And
want the poem up, Anne?
I'll just read it. It's okay. Yeah, you can put it up.
Okay.
Sure. I
Okay.
think it's going to be more important to put it up for idea of order at Key West because that's longer and more complicated. But whatever you want to do
Uh,
is farewell to
well,
Florida. One.
Uh, sorry.
I sent it separately.
Yeah, I know. I got it though.
Okay.
Uh, sorry.
It's okay. It's just not going to be in this set of poems.
No, I put
Yes,
it
it
Yeah,
in.
is.
It is.
Oh, bless
they're
you.
all together now.
Great. One. Go on, high ship, since now upon the shore the snake has left its skin upon the floor. Key West sank downward under massive clouds, and silvers and greens spread over the sea. The moon is at the masthead, and the past is dead. Her mind will never speak to me again. I am free. High above the mast, the moon rides clear of her mind, and the waves make a refrain of this, that the snake has shed its skin upon the floor. Go on through the darkness. The waves fly back. 2. Her mind had bound me round. The palms were hot, as if I lived in ashen ground, as if the leaves in which the wind kept up its sound from my north of cold whistled in a sepulchral south, her south of pine and coral and coralline sea, her home, not mine, in the ever freshened keys, her days, her oceanic nights, calling for music, for whisperings from the reefs. How content I shall be in the north to which I sail, and to feel sure and to forget the bleaching sand. 3. I hated the weathery yawl from which the pools disclosed the seafloor and the wilderness of waving weeds. I hated the vivid blooms curled over the shadowless hut, the rust and bones, the trees like bones, and the leaves half sand, half sun. To stand here on the deck in the dark and say farewell, and to know that the land is forever gone, and that she will not follow in any word or look, nor ever again in thought, except that I loved her once. Farewell. Go on, high ship. 4. My north is leafless and lies in a wintry slime, both of men and clouds, a slime of men in crowds. The men are moving as the water moves, this darkened water cloven by sullen swells against your sides, then shoving and slithering, the darkness shattered, turbulent with foam. To be free again, to return to the violent mind that is their mind, these men, and they will bind me round. Carry me, misty deck, carry me to the cold. Go on, high ship, go on, plunge on. I think it's a very odd poem. Um, I noticed that several of you had comments about who you thought she was. I think she is Florida, and I also think she is the imagination, the kind of tropical imagination. And later we're going to talk about one poem that I really love called Puella Parula, where he's directly addressing his imagination as a little girl, you know. But yeah, Douglas.
I was just going to say that the snake is a symbol of renewal, at least from a Jungian sort of standpoint, because you shed your skin and you're renewed.
But what's odd to me about this poem is that previously he had loved and longed for Florida so much. Florida represented the warmth, the tropicality, the colorfulness, the sensuality, you know. And here, this is a poem of renunciation. It's a palinode, if you like, a term for a poem that is renouncing what the poet has previously embraced, previously celebrated. This is a pretty early poem, so it's not the final word on the subject, but it's a really passionate moment, I think, of feeling that he longs for this abstemiousness, this asceticism, this cold, you know, that he wants to be born back. And I actually really love the kind of melodramatic quality of this poem. It's very dramatic. Go on, high ship, you know, carry me, misty deck, carry me to the cold. Go on, high ship, go on, plunge on. Um, yeah, notice how he uses rhyme a little bit and internal rhyme really beautifully upon the shore, upon the floor. Um, the moon is at the masthead and the past is dead. Beautiful echoes of sounds here. Her mind had bound me round. Um, the wind kept up its sound. So it's subtle. It's not like clobbering us over the head with rhyme, but it's again, it keeps weaving, it keeps turning, it keeps echoing sounds. Her home, not mine, you know. Yeah. So comments on this poem? Yes, Leslie.
Well, I was seeing a lot of things that reminded me of sort of Jungian archetypes and also specific mythological things. That last stanza, it seems, reminds me a little bit of Odysseus being bound to the mast so he can't succumb to, the lure of the siren song. And it seems like to me he's a little bit, if the snake shedding its skin is sort of a Jungian feminine thing that's in contrast with this masculine aggressiveness of these guys
Mm.
that are violent and everything like that. He seems to be a little bit, to me, to be afraid of what he encountered in Key West in terms of um, her mind had bound me round. And then we get to the end um, to return to the violent mind that is their mind that will bind me round and carry me misty deck, carry me to the cold. He's scared of the tropics. He needs to get back and be a snowman, as far as I'm concerned.
Very nicely put. Yeah. There's a lot of gender um ambivalence here. I don't mean with regard to his own sexual identity, but with regard to his own imaginative self-conception, it seems to me,
He,
Yes.
he, he continuously refers to Florida uh, in feminine terms.
Yeah.
And the emotional tone that I get from it is one of revulsion. It's like I loved her, and now I just want to get the hell out of here. And a sort of disgust. And the fact that he keeps attributing mind to this place makes me wonder if there isn't a double meaning that involves an actual woman that he had fallen in love with and now really wants to get away from. And I, unlike Douglas, I didn't view the snake skin as a rebirth or a renewal, but rather I mean, something that he was a little bit revolted by and wanted to get away from.
I don't have any knowledge of any actual woman. I mean, he was married. He was a married guy. He wasn't necessarily a happily married guy, but he was married. I don't never heard anything about.
I don't know anything about extramarital affairs, but I think the poem definitely makes you feel what Alan said, and that is that there's an actual woman there. I know that she and her refer to Florida, but I keep having to remind myself,
Yeah.
particularly with a line like, her mind will never speak to me again.
Yeah.
That sounds like it's about a human being. Um, if I could permit myself a digression to a very different poet, there's an Eleanor Wiley sequence, Wild Peaches. One of the sonnets in it, I think, is really fine, though it's got a couple of weak lines in it. And it's about going back to New England and preferring New England to the lushness of Maryland, which is, of course, not as extreme as the lushness of Florida. But what strikes me about that poem, as opposed to Farewell to Florida, is that you can see what she loves about New England. Whereas Stevens seems to be saying, well, okay, I'm going back to my home and my business and I know what to do there,
Yeah.
rather than having any longing for Connecticut or New England. The sonnet goes like this: down to the Puritan marrow of my bones, there's something in this richness that I hate. I love the look, austere, immaculate, of landscapes drawn in pearly monotones. There's something in my very blood that owns Gray hills, cold silver on a sky of slate, a thread of water churned to milky spate, flowing through slanted pastures fenced with stones.
Mm.
I loved the skies, thin blue or snowy gray, the fields sparse planted, rendering meager sheen. The spring briefer than apple blossom's breath, summer so much too beautiful to stay, swift autumn like a bonfire of leaves, and sleepy winter like the sleep of death. Um,
What's the name of
yeah,
that poem?
what?
The name of the poem by Eleanor Wiley Brown?
Wild Peaches.
Wild. That's
Yeah, and I think the other sonnets probably spoke Maryland more than this one does, but this one, gives you enough to feel like she's reacting to something real and
Yeah.
attractive, but back to New England because she likes that better.
Yeah.
yeah, but he's talking about my north is as in a wintry slime,
I
and
Yeah,
know.
talking
No,
about it, the men are shoving and slithering. I mean, doesn't that sound like another snake?
Yeah.
yeah.
And so what's that all about? What,
Well, personally, I think, Douglas is certainly right about what the snake's shedding its skin usually symbolizes. And I think it's a sign of a sort of bleakness in this poem that Stevens doesn't seem interested in that renewal. So
Yeah.
about the renewal, I agree with him that it's not there, but maybe it should be there when you think of a snake shedding its skin, or at least there's good reason for it to be there, but it isn't.
So just to complicate things, now we'll look at the idea of order in Key West, which comes after Farewell to Florida in the book. So, that is to say, Farewell to Florida doesn't come after the idea of order. It's like poets are allowed to change their minds, and there's a lot of mind changing that goes on if you read enough poems by any given poet. So we should look at this as screen sharing. This is one of Stevens's very most famous poems, probably along with Sunday Morning, um, and along with The Emperor of Ice Cream and a couple of others. But I'll read it to you. It's very beautiful. Peter doesn't like it. I like it much better than he does.
I like some of it.
He likes some of it.
I think there's more sound than sense sometimes. I just wanted to explain.
The idea of order at Key West. She sang beyond the genius of the sea. The water never formed to mind or voice like a body, holy body, fluttering its empty sleeves. And yet its mimic motion made constant cry, caused constantly a cry that was not ours, although we understood inhuman of the veritable ocean. The sea was not a mask, no more was she. The song and water were not medleyed sound, even if what she sang was what she heard, since what she sang was uttered word by word. It may be that in all her phrases stirred the grinding water and the gasping wind, but it was she and not the sea we heard. For she was the maker of the song she sang. The ever hooded, tragic gestured sea was merely a place by which she walked to sing. Whose spirit is this, we said, because we knew it was the spirit that we sought and knew that we should ask this often as she sang. If it was only the dark voice of the sea that rose, or even colored by many waves, if it was only the outer voice of sky and cloud, of the sunken coral water walled, however clear, it would have been deep air, the heaving speech of air, a summer sound repeated in a summer without end and sound alone. But it was more than that, more even than her voice and ours among the meaningless plungings of water and the wind, theatrical distances, bronze shadows heaped on high horizons, mountainous atmospheres of sky and sea. It was her voice that made the sky acutest at its vanishing. She measured to the hour its solitude. She was the single artificer of the world in which she sang. And when she sang, the sea, whatever self it had, became the self that was her song, for she was the maker. Then we, as we beheld her striding there alone, knew that there never was a world for her except the one she sang and singing made. Ramon Fernandez, tell me if you know why, when the singing ended and we turned toward the town, tell why the lights in the fishing boats at anchor there, as the night descended, tilting in the air, mastered the night and portioned out the sea, fixing emblazoned zones and fiery poles, arranging, deepening, enchanting night. Oh, blessed rage for order, pale Ramon, the makers rage to order words of the sea, words of the fragrant portals, dimly starred, and of ourselves and of our origins in ghostlier demarcations, keener sounds. So let's go back to where we can see everybody again. So this poem it's really gorgeous. It's really fancy. I think "Oh Blessed Rage for Order, Pale Ramon" is kind of funny. And Ramon Fernandez, tell me if you know, much ink has been spilt trying to discern who Ramon Fernandez might be referring to. There was a French man of letters who was a friend of Wallace Stevens, who was, at the time this poem was written, he was a literateur. And at the time of this poem, he was a communist, but he became a fascist. So, that is sort of agreed upon as probably who Ramon Fernandez was. The she is absolutely unidentified. And we can imagine that Stevens is imagining a she, or we can imagine that he heard a girl singing on a beach. Just like Wordsworth hears or sees the girl, what is the part?
Solitary
The
reaper.
solitary reaper. Yeah. So this could be, that kind of thing where the poet sees a young woman and is profoundly moved by what he sees and dwells upon it in his imagination. But what we have here is the same counters that he keeps coming back to again and again and again and teasing out the possible implications of the imagination and reality, or nature and the creative mind. So we've got the ocean here, the ocean at Key West, and there's much that describes the music of the ocean, like a body, holy body fluttering its empty sleeves, sort of like a no dancer, the Japanese drama form with the kimono sleeves that play a really important part in the action. It's mimic motion, make constant cry. What is it mimicking? Is it mimicking the girl's song? Well, not really. If you're looking at a real ocean, that was not, it caused constantly a cry that was not ours, although we understood this is the veritable ocean, the real ocean, the ocean that can be verified, the true ocean. The sea was not a mask. No, the sea is not a mask of human utterance. The sea is the sea. No more was she and her song a mask of the sea. So you have these two identities here, the girl slash song, and the ocean. The song and the water were not medley sound, even if what she sang was what she heard, since what she sang was uttered word by word in human language. So human language is not the language of the ocean. It's not the roar of the ocean. It is maybe responding to the sound of the ocean. It may be that in all her phrases stirred the grinding water and the gasping wind, but it was she and not the sea we heard. For she was the maker of the song she sang. Now, the ancient Greek word for the poet is the maker. The poet is the maker. She's the poet. She's making the song that we heard. So is she Stevens's imagination once again characterized as female, or is she a real girl? I don't think it matters at all. The ever-hooded, tragic gestured sea was merely a place by which she walked to sing. Later, he's going to elevate the sea a little bit more than that. It's not just merely a place, it's woven in with the song. Whose spirit is this? We said because we knew it was the spirit that we sought and knew that we should ask this often. So, what is the spirit? What is the Daimon, the demon, the force that creates the song? What is the wildness that creates the song, like the wildness of the sea? It's more than just the dark voice of the sea, more even than her voice and ours. What is this that's creating the song? What spirit is moving through both the sea and the human singer? More than that, more even than her voice and ours. Among the meaningless plungings of water in the wind, theatrical distances, bronze shadows heaped on high horizons, mountainous atmospheres of sky and sea. I mean, it's gorgeous, gorgeous landscape. And it's like, what's the transcendent energy that is moving through this landscape and moving through this girl and moving through this song? And then it was her voice that made the sky acutest at its vanishing. So somehow human utterance is that because it makes us notice it more, it gives it piquancy. She measured to the hour its solitude. So human speech is measured speech, and especially if it's poetry. This is measured speech. This is iambic pentameter. It's blank verse. She measured to the hour its solitude. She was a single artificer. James Joyce um, calls the poet the artificer, the artist the artificer. She was a single artificer of the world in which she sang. And when she sang, the sea, whatever self it had, became the self that was her song, for she was the maker. This is getting pretty close to saying um, the human creation is what creates meaning rather than somehow in tandem with or in consort with the world of nature. Then we, as we beheld her striding there alone, knew that there never was a world for her except the one she sang and singing made. And then we've got Ramon Fernandez, which I think is that's a really famous line. Grad students love to laugh at that line. Ramon Fernandez, tell me if you know. It's like, what the hell? But why does human beauty, human creation, the glassy lights, the lights in the fishing boats, why does that somehow add extra measure to the world of nature? Measures, masters the night, portions out the sea, fixing emblazoned zones and fiery poles, arranging, deepening, enchanting night. So we've got this gorgeous picture of the black, black sea, the black night, the fishing lights, emblazoning the poles, enchanting night. And then we have this final celebration. Oh, blessed rage for order, the maker's rage, the poet's rage, to order words of the sea, words of the fragrant portals. Portals, that's a gateway. Gateway to what?
Mm-hmm.
Dimly starred, and of ourselves, words of ourselves, and of our origins in ghostlier demarcations, keener sounds. Harold Bloom says it's impossible to tease out finally the meaning of this poem. It's like, it's just kind of all over the place. But I think it's really gorgeous. And it's like, again, these same entities, as I said, reality, the imagination, the natural world, the world of human creation. What is the relation between them? Stevens in this poem seems to be intuiting that there is some kind of transcendent energy infusing both.
Mm-hmm.
In other poems, he will say, no, that's not the case, you know, but this is part of the ongoing sort of lifelong poetic project that Stevens is embarked upon. And as I said, it's one of the most famous of his poems. And notice that in this poem, he has by no means given up Florida. Florida is the ground of this poem. I mean that metaphorically too. It is the place, the place that makes this meditation possible, you know. So, who would like to say what about this poem?
I just want to say again that I think there are very beautiful things in the poem. It seems to me that in the main body of the poem, he is too insistent in leaning toward the idea that nature means nothing and human beings, by their words, create whatever meaning there is. And I think in those last five lines, he kind of goes back on that. It's the maker's rage to order words of the sea. So it's as if the sea were speaking incoherent words and the maker has a rage to order them. And it just seems to me that in those last five lines, he grasps something. I couldn't say fumbling because it's a beautiful and technically very accomplished poem, but grasps something that he is almost trying to avoid in much of the poem, but finally comes back to.
Yeah, yeah. The relationship of the high modernist writers to the other than human world is really complicated. It's really important and really complicated. And sometimes, for instance, in Sunday morning, I can make an argument that that's an eco poem. You know, deer walk upon our mountains, sweet berries ripen in the wilderness. That is acknowledging the reality of something that happens without our even being there, without our even knowing that it's happening. We just know it, but we don't have to be there to make it happen. This one is much more an insistence that we are the ones who are creating the music through our song. And then, as you say, there's this wordless music of nature itself. But it's going to take till we get till Robinson Jeffers to really get somebody who's saying, who's writing what I would call sort of full-fledged eco poetry. Williams has moments of it, um, but it comes and goes, comes and goes. It's important.
Hmm.
So thoughts on this? Yeah, Leslie.
Well, I'm still wrestling with all this stuff, but it seems to me like the first of all, the we seems a little bit like a royal we to me. It's not that there was more than one person. It's just sort of I am representing. Really, I'm not always that keen on Jungian archetypes and stuff, but it seems like a very male we. And and then you've got this female who is like a sort of a feminine medium who is
Hmm.
filtering the sea and the sky and the wind through
Hmm.
through this consciousness. And she is, I mean, isn't that what poetry is, or writing, or interacting? Isn't that what people do when they experience these raw forces of nature? And then they sift it through a human, um, maybe not a mind, he's saying. This is more of a body, so it's a more of an intuitive thing, I think. But it's being made, this is an artificer. Before he was talking about seeming and being, it seems like that's what poets do, is they speak in metaphor. They translate being into seeming. And you're making comparisons. But then when we get down to the language at the end of it, the words like, so he's turning away from the sea toward the town, and you have these lights, which seem to me more like a contrast, a civilization of land. You're there, and the words mastered and fixing and arranging
Hmm.
seem, even though he's talking about making again, the maker's rage, the earlier maker wasn't raging. It wasn't about rage at all. It was a much softer, it was fluttering its empty sleeves. That's not rage. So it seemed maybe his blessed rage for order, because I don't think the earlier part of the poem is about making a human order out of things. It's not an intellectual thing. Maybe that's, again, I'm more of a masculine thing. I don't know. Anyway, it did seem like there was a different feeling at the end than the genius than the sort of medium who is transmuting all this nature through the body part of consciousness.
Yeah. I don't interpret rage as anger so much as passion, kind of driving passion to do so. Laurel, you've got your hand up. You're
Um,
okay.
the feeling for much of it is they're facing the sea and it's very much not in control. There's all sorts of things going on. There's voices and noise and crashing waves and it's whether it's not even the sea, it's everything. When you face that direction, it's wild. It's and you listen to it, but you're not, but then you turn around and face inland and there are the fishing boats and the little lights and it reminds me a little bit of the poem where the one with the angles and squares and rectangles, that when you face the land, it's sort of partitioned up and it's kind of not really in control, but sort of trying the lights there. It's a very different. So you face one direction and what you can do is listen and observe and it's wild and you can perceive it. But you face the other direction, you sort of have this illusion that the boats and the little lights and something are more under control, and you don't hear the same things you hear when you face out toward the sea. So it's different. It's like the whether you should think in curves or think of in rectangles.
Yeah, Douglas.
Yeah, I agree with what Laurel was saying. It to me, it's the lights, which I picture as being lanterns on top of poles that are shoved in the muddy bottom of the inlet or whatever it is, and they've portioned up the night, and they've given an order to the night that is not, when you turn around, as Laurel says, in the other direction, you're looking out to sea and it's all chaos and crashing.
Well, but a Key West ocean wouldn't have to be chaos.
No, that's true.
You're thinking New
But it
England.
would be different. It would be less orderly than the fishing boats with their lights,
Yeah, but I'm trying to figure out the geography then. Where can the fishing boats be? They're in the sea. They're in the water.
They're in the harbor.
They're in the
I
harbor.
would assume they're in an inlet or a harbor or
Okay.
sheltered area.
Okay.
At night,
Yeah.
they're sheltered, but during the day, if you look out, and it doesn't have to be crashing waves or anything, but it's control, as Tony, I think would testify from having had a not fishing boat, but a boat split in half in a seemingly benign, tropical sea. It's not someplace where you're entirely in control.
Right. Right. Yeah. So what do you think of this poem? I'm just curious. I'm always curious if people like what we're reading.
Well, it's all a Rorschach test, and I unfortunately have a certain orientation that would be a little bit different. I thought of I want to ask you, Anne, something too, and that's the definition of eco poetry, because you said that this didn't seem to be a pure eco poetry. So I wonder if you could define that or delineate that for us. And then, but before that, I just wanted to say that the program or the job of philosophy since the get-go, we start out with mythology, and it's all about trying to create a human, an explanation on a human scale of what we're experiencing. And we start out with poetry, and then we mythology, and ended up in the 20th century with people saying, well, here's the bare bones of what we can actually say, and leaving the rest to the poets, as it were. And in other words, kind of giving up on that project. Uh, that's just one way of looking at it. But anyway, what about back to the definition of eco poetry? How do you distinguish that from Wordsworth talking about the woods?
Okay. There's always been nature poetry. There's always been poetry about the natural world. But eco poetry is poetry that comes from the realization. Okay, a lot of nature poetry is about a person in nature in which nature is kind of a backdrop. It's like I am taking a wonderful walk through these woods and then I will, whatever, whatever. Eco poetry is poetry that considers the other than human world as equally meaningful, equally significant, and equally real as the human. Um, so go ahead.
By that definition, I'd say Wordsworth is the quintessential echo poet.
Well, a lot.
Byron sometimes uses landscapes just as a background, but I don't think Wordsworth ever looks at nature that way. He's just, he hasn't spent time in the wildest or most dangerous parts of it, but he spent an awful lot of time walking in mountains and hills in
Mhm.
all seasons. And he just doesn't, he never sees it as only a backdrop.
No, exactly. Like there's a great passage in the Prelude where Wordsworth is walking across the Alps, and I can't quote it. Can you quote it? The waterfall passage?
I probably can if you give me a minute or two
Okay, Peter will
to
quote it
look.
in a minute. Um, you know, hang on, Douglas, just a sec. There's a lot of different kinds of eco poetry. There's a lot of different poems that could be referred to as eco poetry. Some of them are just celebrations of the natural world. Some of them are like some of Gary Snyder's poems, highly political. You know, some of them are very experimental, looking at what language is, what human language is. And trying to consider what the edges of human language are, how language can address or be in contact with the world that does not use human language. How can we write about the natural world, so it's kind of a huge field. There's stuff that's just like poems about fracking or poems. I mean, I'm trying to think. When we get to Robinson Jeffers, let's come and look at that again, okay? But eco poetry is just the one thing to remember is that it's poetry that considers the other than human world as significant, real, and not just a backdrop for human emotions and actions. Okay,
or
Douglas?
or a metaphor for human
Yeah,
actions, right?
right,
Oh,
right.
okay.
So is it
Wait,
this?
Douglas.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that maybe nature poetry, thinking about Wordsworth and such, that could be written when people could take nature for granted, whereas eco
Yeah.
poetry, we can no longer take nature for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that term really came into existence around 1960. At the same time as the Clean Air Act, same time as so many other things. Yeah, so absolutely. But something like Joyce Kilmer's Trees, that's a nature poem. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree, but it's not accurate about trees. It's not really about trees. The other thing, so I was once at a workshop with the poet Hattie Ann Rogers, and somebody wrote a poem about a mouse, and it was an inaccurate poem about a mouse. And I tried on the behalf of this person to defend it, like, oh, maybe she's using the mouse as a symbol of Patty Ann Rogers is like, no, it's not accurate about the mouse. And that's another thing that eco poetry has to be. It has to be accurate. It can't just be saying, oh, the mouse is like my little girl's braids, blah, 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 blah. No, no, it's a mouse, you
I
know?
have to say that the poem about the tree,
Yeah,
it was good enough to rank a mad parody of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Are you ready for the waterfall? Waterfall.
Yeah, I assume this is the Simplon Pass
Yes,
passage.
yes. Okay, so take it away.
So he's walking across the Alps. Um, The brook and road were fellow travelers in this gloomy pass, and with them did we journey several hours at a slow pace. The immeasurable height of woods decaying, never to be decayed, the stationary blasts of waterfalls, and in the narrow rent at every turn, winds thwarting winds, bewildered and forlorn. The rocks that muttered close upon our ears, black drizzling crags that spake by the wayside as if a voice were in them, the sick sight and giddy prospect of the raving stream, tumult and peace, the darkness and the light, were all like workings of one mind, the features of the same face, blossoms upon one tree, characters of the great apocalypse, the types and symbols of eternity, of first and last and midst and without end.
That poetry gives me goosebumps. It's so beautiful, so amazingly beautiful. But just that imagery describing a world which is completely other than human and ongoing. Of course, Wordsworth can still think of nature as you say, undamaged.
He does see it as threatened, though. In the preface to Lyrical Ballads, he speaks of the increasing accumulation of men and cities where the uniformity of their occupations produces a craving for extraordinary incident. And you can mock Wordsworth's dislike of industry as just reactionary, but I think he was aware of the benefits of industry and still worried about what it was doing to the natural world without, of course, knowing what we know by
Right.
now. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, Douglas.
I was just going to say, I had to look it up, but he was living almost 200 years after the Enclosure Act,
Yeah.
which, drove people off the land and into the cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Leslie.
I was thinking about Gerard Manley Hopkins'
Oh,
poem,
yeah.
The Binsey Poplars. I mean,
Yeah.
wouldn't you call that an eco poem?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
for
It's a great
sure.
poem.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Do you know that one by heart?
Not at the moment. I have learned it, but it's a hard poem to remember.
This is
It's
so
a
funny.
great poem.
This is so funny. At one point, I can't remember what it was about, but years ago, I asked Peter something. He goes, "What makes you think I should know that?" I'm like, "Well,
Yeah,
because
exactly. You kind of led by example. What do you think? We're just going to ask you everything like Chat GPT.
exactly, I know." Yeah. Other comments? Man, once you start talking about poetry, it's just endlessly fascinating, because thing leads on to thing. Any fun, but I just want to know, please, just a simple like, dislike. What are you enjoying or not enjoying?
I like it. I,
Cool.
I like the sounds. I like, when Peter has something memorized, memorizing a poem is really different than just reading a poem several times. You have to sort of make it part of your own substance. And sometimes the sounds are very seductive to me. And so I really like that. And I like the images and I like this character of whoever she is. It's a really it's an appealing character to me. So
Yeah. Julia, you're so quiet. How about you? You're mute.
Well, I haven't had a chance to print out, so I'm just um, with the Wallace Stevens. But last week I did want to comment on uh, this layering of the beautiful images of the lacy patterns. It reminded me of being in a talk at Yale when I had to kind of, during the 300-year celebration, there were multiple talks everywhere for visitors. And Benoit Mandelbrot was talking about fractals. And I've never had much of my mathematics background uh, was shorter than it should have been. And I never got to calculus. And I always wondered, I always heard how beautiful it is if you get that far. Well, in that moment of him describing and showing his slides, the Mandelbrot set, I think is what it's called, of coastlines and cauliflower and Hindu temples, and uh, it all dimensions, all similar, these wonderful mathematical uh, similarities, or and it was just mind-boggling. And I got that feeling from what we were talking about last week. I just didn't quite get it formulated enough to say it. Um, so I have enjoyed that very much. And all along, the more I'm able to ponder over them and reread, I'm enjoying more and more. So
Super.
that's
Yeah, I
my,
love fractals. I love fractals. I know nothing about math, but I keep throwing fractals in my poetry.
I have to leave. I will see you Tuesday. Bye bye.
Bye, Laurel. Have a good weekend.
I do remember Benzie Poplins
Okay.
if you want.
Brian?
No, I was saying goodbye to Laurel.
Oh, okay. Okay. Peter remembers Binsey poplars. So let's go out on that note, okay?
Benzie Poplars, Feld, 1879. My aspens dear, whose airy cages quelled and quenched in leaves the leaping green, all felled, are all felled, of a fresh and following folded rank, not one spared, not one that dandled a sandaled shadow that swam or sank on meadow and river and wind wandering, weed winding bank. Oh, if we but knew what we do when we dig or delve, hack or rack the growing green, since country is so tender to touch, her being so slender that like this sleek and seeing ball but a prick will make no eye at all, where we, even where we mean to mend her, we end her, when we dig or delve. 10 or 12, only 10 or 12 strokes of havoc unselve the sweet especial scene, rural scene, a rural scene, sweet especial rural scene.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, great.
oh,
So have a good weekend, you guys. And see you next time. I'll be getting together some poems to send you too. Okay, take care.
All
Thanks
right.
for being here.
Bye.
Bye.